In 1952, a mother in a small fishing village looked at her tiny son and said, "You will never be enough." 70 years later, a man stood in front of 2 billion people and proved every single person like her wrong. This is not just a football story. This is the story of what happens when a child's dream survives. The 15th of June, 2026, Atlanta, Georgia. Spain, one of the greatest football nations on earth, lined up against a tiny island country most people couldn't find on a map, Cape Verde. Population 529,000. And in goal stood a 40-year-old man named Vozinha. The crowd expected a massacre. What they got was a miracle. His real name is Josimar José Évora Dias, but everyone calls him Vozinha, which means little granny in Portuguese. Not because he was soft. Because as a kid, older boys would beat him on the street and laugh. Go cry to your grandma. He took that name, he owned it, and he wore it all the way to the World Cup. Now here's what this channel is really about. Because in the 1950s, when Vozinha's grandparents were raising their children, there was a rule. An unspoken iron rule that ran through every household, every school, every church. Know your place. If you were small, you stayed small. If you were poor, you stayed poor. Dreams were not encouraged. Dreams were dangerous. Vozinha didn't grow up with his parents. He grew up with his grandparents. And in the 1950s world they came from, grandparents carried a certain wisdom, a quiet, unshakable belief that if you worked hard enough, God would see you. They didn't have money. They didn't have connections. But they had faith. And they gave it to him. When Vozinha went to trials as a boy, coaches looked at him and shook their heads. Too small. That's it. No other reason, just too small. And here is where the 1950s mentality did its damage. Because in that era, and for decades after, adults made permanent decisions about children based on temporary conditions. A child's height at age 12 does not determine his soul at age 40. The 1950s mother had a phrase she used constantly. Be realistic. It sounded like wisdom. It felt like love. But very often it was fear wearing the costume of advice. Because these mothers had lived through wars, through poverty, through loss, and so they taught their children, don't reach too high, the fall will kill you. They meant well. But they were wrong. Vozinha turned professional at age 25. 25. In modern football, most players are already in their prime or thinking about decline. Every expert would have told him, it's too late. Angola, Moldova, Cyprus, Slovakia. He played in countries most football fans have never followed. He packed his bags over and over again because he refused to accept that his story was finished. The night before the Spain match, Vozinha thought about his mother. She had tried to come to Atlanta to watch her son play in the World Cup. She couldn't get a visa in time. They didn't have enough money to pay for it. The woman who raised him, who believed in him when no one else did, would watch from a screen thousands of miles away, and he stepped onto that field anyway. This channel talks a lot about what 1950s mothers knew. And here is one thing they knew deeply. Sacrifice is love made visible. Vozinha's mother couldn't be there. But every meal she cooked, every prayer she said, every morning she woke up early so her son could have something to eat that was all in goal with him on June 15th. And then the whistle blew. Spain came at Cape Verde like a wave. Shot after shot. Star after star. Lamine Yamal, born the same year Vozinha turned professional. Pedri. Ferran Torres. 27 shots total, and Vozinha stopped them. All of them, diving left, diving right, reading the game like a man who had been preparing for this exact moment his entire life. Because he had been. When the final whistle blew 0-0, Vozinha walked to his net, and he broke down. Not from exhaustion, from a weightlifting that had been on his shoulders for 40 years. His teammates ran to him, they mobbed him. And the whole world watched a 40-year-old man cry like the little boy who was once told he was too small to matter. Before the match, 45,000 Instagram followers. By midnight, over 2 million. Within days, nearly 10 million and climbing. The world had been waiting for this story without knowing it. Because we are all starving for proof that it is not too late. That what was dismissed can rise. That the small boy from the fishing island can stand between the posts and say, "Not today." So what did the 1950s get wrong about children's dreams? Everything and nothing. They were right that life is hard. They were right that failure hurts. But they were wrong that protecting a child from disappointment is the same as protecting them from harm. Killing a dream early doesn't prevent pain. It just replaces one kind of pain with another, the lifelong ache of what if. Vozinha proved something science has been trying to tell us for decades. The human brain develops well into our 40s. Mastery takes time, sometimes decades. The greatest mistake we inherited from the 1950s is the deadline. The idea that if you haven't succeeded by a certain age, the door is closed. Vozinha didn't just open that door. He kicked it off its hinges. So, what should a parent do today when their child tells them an impossible dream? Here is what Vozinha's story teaches us. First, don't measure the dream against the current reality. He was small. His island was tiny. His career started late. None of that was the measure of what he could become. Measure the fire, not the size of the flame. And here is the beautiful paradox. The very grandparents who raised Vozinha from that 1950s world of hard rules and quiet sacrifice, they actually gave him the one thing modern life sometimes fails to give children: roots, stability. The unspoken message: we believe you will survive whatever comes. That is not nothing. That is everything. After the match, Vozinha said, "I cried because my grandparents could not be there. They passed away years ago. My mother could not be here because of a visa issue. I would have loved her to be here." In that moment, every person who has ever achieved something without the people they love most standing beside them felt that, deeply. Paul Pogba posted about him. Millions shared his story. But why? We have seen great football before. We have seen great saves. What made Vozinha different is that he looked like someone's father, someone's neighbor, someone's forgotten dream. He looked like the version of us that we gave up on and somehow kept going anyway. The 1950s mother worked hard. She sacrificed everything. But too often she did it silently, and she passed that silence on to her children. The lesson Vozinha gives us is louder. Say it. Say, "I believe in you." Say it to your children. Say it to yourself. Because the 40-year-old goalkeeper who stopped Spain, he heard those words somewhere, in his grandparents' kitchen, in his mother's prayers, and he never forgot them. Vozinha's story is not over. Cape Verde's World Cup is not over, and neither is yours. If no one told you today, you are not too small, you are not too late, and you are not forgotten. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. They're waiting.